Stop and imagine this. You're 65 years old. You have grandchildren, beautiful kids, ages 5, 8, and 10. Your sons call you. They say, "Dad, the kids ask about you. They want to meet their grandfather. Can you come visit?" What do you say? Most people would say yes immediately. Grandchildren are supposed to be one of life's great joys. A chance to love without the pressure of parenting. A chance to pass on wisdom. A chance to heal relationships with your children by connecting with their children. But Napoleon Hill at 65 said, no, not maybe, not I'm too busy right now, just no. His sons were shocked. They asked why. Hill's answer was cold and firm. I wasn't a good father to you. I won't pretend to be a good grandfather to them. That would be hypocrisy. When I'm ready to be genuine, I'll meet them. Until then, no. And Hill held that position for 15 years. From age 65 to 80, he refused all contact with his grandchildren. His sons begged. His ex-wives pleaded. Friends told him he was making a terrible mistake, that he'd regret it when it was too late. Hill didn't budge. For 15 years, those grandchildren grew up knowing they had a famous grandfather who'd written best-selling books and taught millions of people. But they couldn't meet him. He refused. Then suddenly, at age 80, Hill changed his mind. He called his sons and said, "I'm ready now. Bring the grandchildren. I want to meet them." What changed? Why did Hill refuse for 15 years then suddenly reverse course? If you stay with me for the next 15 minutes, I'm going to tell you the real reason Hill refused to meet his grandchildren. Why that refusal, as cruel as it seemed, came from a place of brutal honesty, and what finally changed that made him ready. Because this story isn't about stubbornness or coldness, it's about something far more complicated, the relationship between guilt, redemption, and the courage to admit you're not ready for something everyone expects you to do. Before we go deeper, comment right now, honest no over fake yes. Because what Hill did took more courage than pretending. Hit like, subscribe to the channel, and let's discover why Napoleon Hill refused to meet his grandchildren until age 80. Here's what actually happened. In 1948, Hill was 65 years old. His oldest son David had 3 children, ages 5, 8, and 10. Beautiful kids. Hill's first grandchildren. David called his father and invited him to meet them. Expected yes, got no. David was hurt and confused. "Dad, they're your grandchildren. They want to know you. What's the problem?" Hill's response was brutally honest in a way that made David even more uncomfortable. Hill said, "David, I was absent for most of your childhood. I chose my work over you repeatedly. I justified it by telling myself I was building something important. But the truth is I avoided the difficulty of being present as a father, and you suffered for it. Our relationship suffered for it. Now you want me to meet your children and play the role of loving grandfather? I can't do that. It would be fake. I don't know how to be present with children. I proved that with you. And I won't perform a role for your kids that I couldn't authentically live with you. That would be disrespectful to you and dishonest to them." David tried to argue, "But this could be your chance to do it differently, to be the grandfather you couldn't be as a father." Hill responded, "That's what people say, second chance, redemption through grandchildren. But that's using your kids to make me feel better about my failures with you. I won't do that. If and when I'm genuinely ready to be present, available, and authentic with children, I'll reach out. But I'm not there yet, and I won't fake it just because society expects grandfathers to be involved." The conversation ended. David was hurt, but also strangely respected his father's honesty. Most absent parents jump at the chance to be involved grandparents. It lets them avoid the guilt of their failures as parents by playing a new role with new kids. Hill refused that easy redemption. For the next 15 years, Hill held this boundary. His sons would occasionally reach out, send photos of the grandchildren, invite him to birthdays, graduations, holidays. Hill declined every time, always with the same explanation. "I'm not ready to be genuine. When I am, I'll reach out. Until then, it's better that I'm absent than present, but fake. People who knew about this were divided. Some thought Hill was admirably honest, refusing to perform a role he couldn't authentically inhabit. Others thought he was using honesty as an excuse for continued selfishness. Either way, the grandchildren grew up knowing they had a grandfather who wouldn't meet them. Not because he was dead or far away, because he chose not to. Then in 1963, Hill was 80 years old. Something shifted. He called David and said, "I'm ready now. I'd like to meet the grandchildren if they're willing." David was shocked. 15 years of refusal, then sudden reversal? What changed, Dad? Hill's answer revealed everything. "I've spent the last 15 years working on myself, not to earn the right to meet them, but to become someone capable of being genuinely present. And I think I'm finally there. Not perfect, but genuine. I can show up now without performing, without using them to make myself feel better. I can be there for them, not for me." That's what changed. David arranged a meeting. The grandchildren, now 20, 23, and 25, met their grandfather for the first time. It was awkward initially. Hill didn't pretend otherwise. He said to them directly, "I know this is strange. I'm sorry I wasn't in your lives earlier. It wasn't about you. It was about me not being ready. I'm ready now, and I'd like to know you if you're willing." What followed was honest conversation. The grandchildren asked why he'd stayed away. Hill told them the truth. He'd been an absent father. He wasn't ready to be a present grandfather. He needed time to change. They asked if he'd changed. Hill said, "I think so, but you'll have to judge that by how I show up, not by what I say." Over the next 7 years until Hill's death at 87, he maintained consistent contact with his grandchildren. Not constant. He didn't try to make up for lost time by overwhelming them, but consistent, present when he was there, honest when he couldn't be. And the relationships, started so late, became meaningful. Not because Hill was trying to perform the role of loving grandfather, but because he'd finally learned how to be genuinely present. The grandchildren later said they were glad he'd waited until he was ready, because the grandfather they knew in his 80s was authentic. If he'd met them earlier while still performing, the relationships would have been hollow. Better late and real than early and fake. Now here's what most people miss about this story. They think Hill was selfish for refusing to meet his grandchildren for 15 years. But Hill was doing something most people don't have the courage to do. He was refusing to use his grandchildren to make himself feel better about his failures as a father. Most absent parents jump at grandparent involvement. It's easier, less responsibility, more joy, less accountability. You get to show up for fun moments and leave before it gets hard. And you get to feel like you're redeeming past failures without actually confronting them. Hill saw through that trap. He knew meeting his grandchildren before he was ready would be using them, and he refused to do it. The Stoics would have understood Hill's decision completely. Epictetus taught, "If you wish to be a philosopher, be prepared to be laughed at and mocked." Hill wasn't a philosopher in that sense, but he was living by principle despite mockery. Society mocked him for refusing to meet his grandchildren. He held his principle anyway. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." Hill wasn't arguing what a good grandfather should be. He was refusing to pretend until he actually was one. Seneca wrote, "It is not because things are difficult that we do not dare. It is because we do not dare that things are difficult." Hill dared to say no for 15 years. That was harder than saying yes would have been. Here's what Hill's story teaches. First, genuine presence is better than fake involvement. If you're not ready to show up authentically in a relationship, it's better to be honest about that than to show up and perform. Performance might make you feel better temporarily, but it creates hollow relationships. Hill chose honesty over performance. The delay hurt, but the eventual relationship was real. Second, you cannot use new relationships to redeem old failures without doing the internal work first. Hill couldn't redeem his failures as a father by being a fun grandfather. That would be avoidance disguised as redemption. Real redemption required him to change himself first, then build new relationships from that changed self. Third, society's expectations about family roles don't override your honest assessment of your readiness. Society expected Hill to be involved with his grandchildren. He honestly assessed he wasn't ready. He chose honesty over expectation. That took courage. Most people cave to expectation and perform the role poorly rather than admit they're not ready. Fourth, readiness comes from internal work, not external pressure. Hill didn't become ready because his sons kept asking or because time passed. He became ready because he spent 15 years deliberately working on his capacity to be present. The work created readiness, not the passage of time, not the pressure from others. Fifth, late and genuine beats early and fake. Hill met his grandchildren when they were 20 to 25. He missed their childhoods completely, but the 7 years he had with them were authentic. Those years mattered more than 15 hollow years would have. Better to start real relationships late than maintain fake relationships early. So what does this mean for you? If you're in a situation where people expect you to be involved in a relationship, but you honestly know you're not ready to be genuine, you have Hill's choice. Perform the role to meet expectations, or be honest that you're not ready and do the work to become ready. Most people choose performance because it's easier in the short term. Hill chose honesty because it led to authenticity in the long term. If you're the person being refused, like Hill's grandchildren were, you also have a choice. Resent the refusal and demand involvement regardless of readiness. Or respect the honesty and wait for genuine relationship. Hill's grandchildren chose the second, and they got a real grandfather at 80 instead of a fake one at 65. That trade was worth it. Now here's the hard part. Hill's decision required 15 years of internal work. What was that work? Hill never detailed it completely, but from his writings in that period and conversations with close students, we know some of it. First, Hill had to confront his guilt about being an absent father without using it as motivation to perform. Guilt often makes us try to prove we're better by performing roles we're not ready for. Hill sat with the guilt without performing, learned from it, changed because of it, not to earn redemption, just to grow. Second, Hill had to develop the capacity for presence. This was his biggest challenge. His whole life had been about future achievement, always working toward the next goal, never fully present in the moment. Learning to be present required practice, daily, deliberately. Hill used meditation, conversation with Annie Lou, and conscious efforts to be fully engaged in whatever he was doing. 15 years of practice. Third, Hill had to accept that he couldn't control outcomes. He could become ready, but his grandchildren might still reject him. His sons might never forgive him. That was outside his control. Learning to do the work without guaranteed positive outcome was essential. Otherwise, he'd be performing again, trying to earn specific results. The work had to be for its own sake. By age 80, Hill had done this work. Not perfectly, but sufficiently, and he reached out. The grandchildren could have said no. They didn't. But Hill was prepared for either response. That's what readiness looks like. Doing the work regardless of guaranteed outcome. Being genuinely available without needing specific results. Showing up authentically and accepting whatever follows. Marcus Aurelius faced constant family difficulties despite being emperor. He couldn't control his family's responses. He could only control his own character and actions. That's what he focused on. Hill learned the same lesson. He couldn't control whether his grandchildren would accept him. He could control whether he was genuinely ready to be present. He did the work to become ready, then reached out. The rest was outside his control. Seneca wrote about how many people waste their final years in regret over past mistakes without doing the work to change. Hill didn't do that. He faced his mistakes, did the work to change, then built new relationships from his changed self. That's active redemption, not passive regret. Epictetus taught that some things are up to us and others are not. Up to us, our character, our efforts, our authenticity. Not up to us, other people's responses, outcomes, timeline of relationship. Hill focused on what was up to him, became ready, reached out, accepted what followed. So here's the truth about why Hill refused to meet his grandchildren until 80. Not because he was cold or stubborn, but because he was honest enough to know he wasn't ready and strong enough to refuse to perform until he was. 15 years of internal work. 15 years of becoming capable of genuine presence. Then 7 years of authentic relationship. Better than 22 years of performed involvement. The grandchildren got a real grandfather. Hill got real relationships. Both were worth the wait. The lesson? If you're not ready, be honest. Do the work. Become ready, then reach out. Fake involvement creates hollow relationships. Honest work creates real ones, even if they start late, especially if they start late, because starting late from genuine readiness beats starting early from performance every time. Comment honest no over fake yes, like this video so others learn that genuine presence beats fake involvement. Subscribe because we're teaching hard truths about relationships and readiness, and share with someone performing a role they're not ready for, who needs permission to be honest. Napoleon Hill refused to meet his grandchildren for 15 years. Not from coldness, from honesty. He wasn't ready. He did the work. Then he was ready. 7 years of authentic relationship followed. That's the courage to be real instead of performing. Let's go.